Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this important session on build-to-rent investing. I'm Robert Helms, host of the Real Estate Guys radio program, and joining me in the co-host seat, it's Russell Gray, our financial strategist. Hey, Russ.
I'm getting used to this temporary co-host seat. Been doing this for quite a while.
Quite a while. You know, this is a topic we don't talk about that much, but it's pretty exciting for lots of reasons. So, the big picture is there's lots of ways to invest in real estate. Typical real estate investor might start off investing in a single family home. Maybe they move up to duplexes, fourplexes, 8 units, and then before long, hey, 100 units looks pretty good, and they like multifamily. Other places to invest are commercial, industrial, retail, all kinds of different things you can invest in, even agricultural. You might also invest passively through a private placement. So a lot of different ways to have the benefit of investing in real estate. What we're going to talk about today specifically is how you can invest in what's called build to rent. That doesn't mean that you're building it to rent. It means that you're buying a brand new property that was designed specifically for a tenant. And that's a pretty important distinction. There's a lot of reasons why buying new makes sense, but in most markets and in most product types, buying new is most expensive and it doesn't generate the returns we're looking for as real estate investors. Think about A-class apartments. Those are the brand new, beautiful apartments that are built with tennis courts and elevators and every amenity that's available, and the rent is high and the cap rate's really low. So most individual real estate investors don't necessarily invest in that. Who does? Real estate investment trusts, big insurance companies, pensions invest in stable assets like that. Real estate investors, some look at, B and C class, where the multiplier can be higher and the gross rent can be higher, but management's also difficult. So what we want to do today is kind of set the table for why build to rent makes sense. And then we've got a great panel who actually are all active practitioners in this part of the market who will talk about some of the nuances.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to investing, especially investing in real estate, either you're investing through a big fund and you're getting a piece of a big building with professional management, and there's some advantages to that. And when you look at those big properties that are designed to produce income, they are built specifically for that purpose. They're built to serve the demographic of a rental occupant. When you go to invest in residential real estate, typically smaller units, single family homes especially, those homes are really designed for owner occupants. And yeah, people convert them into renters, but when the developer was building them, that's not what they were thinking about. They didn't engineer them that way. They weren't really designed to optimize the operational profit and keep the operating costs down to create amenities that would appeal more to a tenant maybe and less so to an owner occupant. We'll get into all the weeds of that later. But build to rent is a great opportunity to step into a product that has been built specifically. And I think coming up even above the build to rent side of things is just understanding the safety, if you will, or the wisdom investing in residential, certainly in certain economic times. Because if you think about what the world has experienced as they go through something like a COVID-19 crisis, right? And the world begins to realize, hey, we have to live our entire lives inside of a property, and we're maybe not going to a store to shop, we're maybe not going to an office to work, we're not frequenting retail places. These are all real estate plays that have been affected whenever something like that happens. Well, the one thing that stays common in all marketplaces is that people need a place to live. And so no matter what's going on in the economy or which businesses are hot and which ones aren't, as long as there's people in a community, they're going to need a place to live. And so one of the safest places to invest is residential real estate. And so then you say, okay, what's the best way to do that? And build to rent is one of the things to take a look at, especially in a market cycle where you're at a point where there's not a lot of excess inventory on the market and you've got to try to find a deal. And that's hard to do. So in a marketplace where you've got maybe a lot of demand that's excessive of supply, when the build to rent people come in, they're creating inventory that didn't exist before, and so there's some benefits there. And there's a lot of other benefits, but I think just at the top level, just understanding where in a market cycle it makes sense, why as a defensive strategy while you're still playing offense, residential and especially build to rent can make sense.
And remember, residential doesn't have to be the exclusive thing in your portfolio. Some of you maybe have invested other ways, but you're going to learn some stuff today, and I think be introduced to kind of a world that maybe you didn't know existed. Even single-family home investors often own properties that are 20, 30, 40 years old and not the greatest neighborhoods. So imagine instead if you could have something built ground up, brand new, incorporating today's styles, built with the durability that you need for a tenant, from a company that understands both property management and construction. That's kind of where we're headed with this discussion. So there's a lot of other points we'll bring up, but I think we'll do that with our panelists. So we're excited to have these folks with us today. They're all active practitioners, meaning they're not, on the speaking circuit or writing books or any of that. They are helping folks just like you find opportunities in build-to-rent investing. And it's a wide scope. You can find folks that are building a single home at a time and positioning it for, the kind of rental neighborhoods that make sense. On the other hand, we have some folks today that are building on kind of a large scale, which also has some advantages to it that we'll get to. So in no particular order, we'll say hello to our panelists. So let's first say hello to Steve Olson. He's from Fourplex Investment Group. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, good to be here, guys.
Good to have you. Tell us just a quick bit about the market you're in and the kind of products that you guys build.
Yes, we are the Fourplex Investment Group, otherwise known as FIG, based out of Provo, Utah, here in the Intermountain West. And we primarily develop new construction fourplex communities here in Boise, Idaho, in Phoenix, Arizona, and we've also been known to rummage around Houston, Texas as well.
All right, good stuff. So it's right in your name, Fourplex Investment Group. And these, as you'll learn, are big, beautiful, nice, new-looking fourplexes. So certainly there's people that are going to be attracted to that. Let's go kind of to the other side of the country and say hi to Chris Funk with Southern Impression Homes. How are you, Chris?
Great, sir. How about yourself?
Really good. It's good to see you. Tell us about your market and what you guys are building.
Sure. So we're based in Jacksonville, but we actually build in Jacksonville, Atlanta, Palm Coast, Ocala, Citrus Springs, Port Charlotte, Cape Coral, and Fort Myers. We build everything from townhomes, single-family homes, duplex, triplex, and quadruplex. And we're actually in the process of designing our first sixplex, so soon to come.
Excellent. All right. Now let's stay, I guess, over there on that side of the country and say hi to Wagner and Alaska. Wagner's with the Realty Doctors. And Wagner, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, guys, for having us once again. It's a pleasure. We are here in Orlando, Florida, right in the middle of the state. We serve a lot of areas here close to Central Florida, mainly in the suburbs. So from Palm Bay, very famous about the Space Coast, where Elon Musk, all those fabulous, very smart guys are located, to Deltona Beach. So we have from single family home, duplexes, quads. We have about 2,000 units coming live in the next 36 months. We also extend a little bit to Poinciana, Kissimmee area, which is in the greater Orlando area, all the way up to Ocala and Sebring. And a lot of new surprises come as far as areas are concerned. We take a little longer to launch them because we do a lot of economical drivers. We understand the employers, who is going there. So future areas to come soon, guys. Thank you for having us.
Excellent. Great, Wagner. Now let's meet your partner, and I saved her for last on purpose. We'll say hello to Jean Gillen. Hi, Jean.
Hi, it's so nice to be here with you guys. Thank you for having us.
Always great to see you. And the reason I wanted to kind of end with you, Jean, is that you have a really interesting perspective in that you're a real estate broker that has helped investors for years and years. It's what you do. You don't sell houses to people that live in them. You broker all kinds of real estate for investors. And so we're going to here to talk about build to rent, but you have a bigger scope than that in that you're involved in resales. You certainly help investors find 20, 30, 40-year-old homes, duplexes, that kind of stuff. So talk to us about why you put so much emphasis now on the build to rent niche.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we understand that if we build something now, that we have a really good possibility of having amazing cash flow. Because first of all, the insurance is about a third of what it would be if you have a 20-year-old house, maybe even more if it's older. It's also that to build to rent is something that, I'm doing for my grandkids. There's so many reasons to invest in these houses, and they're small. They're only maybe 1,100, 1,200 square feet, and they're $165,000. You go all over the United States and find something that you would consider living in for $165,000. That's going to be very, very difficult. Also, we're building in areas that have a lot of economics behind them. So we don't build in areas just because we can get lots or something. It has to have economic drivers. So when you go down I-4 corridor or the I-95 corridor, that's where people are moving to because there are amazing amounts of jobs and really good jobs. If you stop at a light in anywhere in Orlando, I just came over to the beach today, you stop at a light and you can look at the license plates, and there'll be a Texas license plate. There'll definitely be a few New York license plates, New Jersey, Illinois, Pennsylvania, California, even license plates. And I saw one the other day, and the guy had written on the side of the truck, "You lost us, California. We're going where the taxes aren't." So there's a reason why people are moving to the Central Florida area. Well, probably all over Florida, but Central Florida is the place where there's jobs, and jobs are important.
Oh, that's such a good point. And when we think about investing in real estate that someone else is going to live in, it's a brilliant idea. Somebody else gets up every day, goes to work, not for you, for somebody else. They send a big portion of their paycheck to you so that you can pay your mortgage and your expenses and have some cash flow besides. And at the end of that 15 or 30 or however long it is, the house is paid off by the tenant. You're getting the tax benefits, and now you've got this great asset. The problem is if I start with a house that's 50 years old, right? In appraisal, we talk about the age life method, which is how we figure out the value or the discount of valuation based on the age of the property. So you brought up a great point, Gene, and you talked specifically about insurance. And of course, you'll find out that insurance on a new property tends to be a little less. But there's also things like builder's warranty, the fact that all the systems in the house, the water heater, everything's brand new. And so let's talk about that part of it, because it's an obvious advantage that build to rent has, but there's some distinctions that I know you guys put into the property because of this very thing. So let's start with Steve. I know that you guys have been doing this a long time in the fourplex world, and it's not exclusively fourplexes that you build, but primarily fourplexes. So talk about that, the brand newness of the property.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of advantages to that, of course, right? When we build something brand new, people intuitively understand that this is going to be lower maintenance. That's not hard to understand. Ironically, though, that building needs to get broken in, right? You get some people moving in there, flushing the toilet, and it's brand new, but there's bugs to be worked out. So a big advantage for investors is typically you're going to have some kind of a builder warranty on these properties, so that break-in period is on the builder's dime. If anything wasn't done the right way, that property can really settle in and become a good rental for you, and deal with those builder warranty claims through whatever it is, the first year, 2, 3, depends. All builders are usually different. So investors really like that. I don't know how much longer this is going to go, but there's some awesome tax advantages that come with building new rental properties that you get, especially if you're a real estate professional. So I think that low maintenance side and then the tax benefits are really what counts.
Yeah, good point. One of the things about when you build new homes that you buy to invest in are not built by developers or even by general contractors. They're built by a group of subcontractors. And so the best builder with the greatest reputation at the end of the day isn't walking around every single house to check every single thing. And so you make a great point. And having a builder's warranty sounds like it's a great idea, because it is, but there is the practical side that, at first we might have missed something. Who knows? Once a tenant gets in there, a tenant's also probably harder on a property than even an owner. So it's actually a good chance to go through those initial months. But Chris, what do you say? You guys are building primarily single family houses, and a lot of them. Talk about the new angle, the appliances, how you decide what goes in the property.
Sure, absolutely. So, the thing I love about it, we've been investing on our own behalf and managing properties for others for the last decade. And, the thing that I love about build to rent is that you're able to minimize the cost of ownership by designing and putting the proper fit and finish in the homes to begin with. So, for example, carpet on a turnover is the most expensive thing that you could possibly have in a turnover of a property.
Yep.
And so every single one of our properties we designed with vinyl plank floors throughout. So instead of having to get a carpet company in there and replacing the carpet, or having a smelly carpet in there and getting less rent because of that, when you have a turnover, you literally just have to go through with a Swiffer and clean it all up. And then, on the hard surfaces, so, the countertops and the kitchens and the bathrooms, you want the home to look great, but you also want it to last forever. So, when a tenant walks in and they see granite countertops and undermount sinks, that gives them the aesthetic feel that makes them want to rent the home. But as a cost of ownership, it's fantastic for the landlord because, if they're not using a cutting board when they're making dinner, it's not going to scratch up because it's granite. If they're leaving the curling iron on the counter in the bathroom, it's not going to burn the laminate, so all of these things that we do up front make it for lower cost of ownership over time. That also comes into the exterior structure as well. So we build both block homes and stick homes, meaning that we build with frame and we build with cement block. But even when we build with frame homes, we build those homes with a cement board exterior. So what that cement board does is that means that you're not going to have wood rot and WDO issues because there's no wood. It looks like wood, but it's actually a cement board. So, all of these things combined together are what keep your cost of ownership down. And the beauty is in new construction, and to Gene's point earlier, the insurance savings, because of the way that these homes are built, they're all built to the brand new existing code. So you get that insurance benefits as well, because every single home has to be inspected by a city or county inspector. They're going to look at it and make sure that you've got the proper hurricane, resistance. You've got all of those proper measures in place. So the insurance companies take that into account when they do their thing. So it's fantastic that you can give the aesthetics for the tenants, but also the landlords, they get the benefit as well from a profitability standpoint.
Well, and there's that tenant advantage, right? All things being equal, a tenant is going to gravitate to something with granite, to something that's brand new, right? To something that feels like a home. And so those things are important. But I think there's a nuance that I want to make sure that they heard, and that is, anytime I buy a rental property, I'm going to have to assume there's going to be some maintenance costs over time. I might put a reserve amount where I take, 2 or 3 or 5% of the rent, every month, and set that aside so that, hey, when that problem happens, when it needs a roof, when it needs a water heater, when I need to make a major repair, I've got that money. That's just a discipline that better investors tend to follow. If you don't, you got to come up with the money in some way. If you own a house in Phoenix or Las Vegas and the air conditioning goes out in the middle of July, you can't wait around for the best bid, right? You got to get that fixed right away. So what it does is, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't keep a reserve, because things may happen, but you're not going to be dipping into that reserve very often. And the other thing is, your cost of ownership in those early years, maybe the first 10 years, is drastically reduced. And that's the trade-off, because one of the elephant in the room we're going to have to talk about is brand new costs the most, right? So I know you guys do a lot to engineer it so that you get a lot of yield, but when I'm paying market rate for it, and I'm not getting some don't want or severe discount, I have to make sure there's offsetting factors, and this is a big one. Now, Wagner, I know Chris mentioned some of the things that you guys do as well, but anything else that you want to mention when it comes to what you do in the home, from the newness point of view, all the way to that long-term kind of cost savings?
I think Chris covered a lot. The only thing that we did differently is, as being an investor myself, I always had an issue. We did over 400 turnkey properties, basically in the common layman terms, flips. At the end of the day, I always wanted a product that will last me longer, that will actually produce a lot less capital expenditure on my pocket, instead of having to replace that hot water heater and that roof and the AC. So what we did is, I came back to Gene and we created what we call a tenant resilient product. And what is that? I only build concrete block construction. I do not build stick or wood. I mean, every builder has to abide by the most newest and updated construction codes. We choose to build concrete block because we believe to be the best. You only do hip roofing because that's actually going to deflect the wind a lot better than a normal roofing would be. In Sebring, for example, we're working with metal roofing, which is much more expensive, but that's going to last you between 40 and 70 years. We also use tile throughout the house or vinyl. Actually, we don't want any carpet turnovers. We always do wood cabinets and granite countertops or quartz. So we do tile backsplash, we do LED lighting, we do commercial or professional water heaters. So they will last you longer on a house. AC units are brand new with a lot of manufacturer warranty, sometimes 15 years on some of the parts because we negotiated. We buy our appliances local from Home Depot. Why? Because your service is going to be quicker if something goes wrong. So it costs us a little bit more, Robert and Russ, but the client will receive a product that is amazing. We also do blinds, we do ceiling fans. So what we do is we'll give the investor a house that is what we call tenant ready. They don't have to spend another dollar or dime to get that house on the market. And why do we do that? Because we're also investors. So we want the best product for us. A regular tenant on a new product that we build, they stay in for about 40 months. And that's amazing, right? So you have a placement fee of usually, in the market of 75% or less or a little bit more on the first year, but then you have $150 renewal fee every month. So the cost of having a good tenant stay in a property for 40 months, it's going to be amazing. You're going to save a lot of money throughout that. So basically, we are a working lab. We're always improving. We're trying to build better, to build more, to save more money. We have 9 builders that actually work exclusively for us right now. And the reason why we do so well in what we do is it's called economy of scale. So we go into an area, we buy several lots, maybe hundreds. And what we do is we buy product for 30, 40 homes. And when we do that, we can save money. I'll give you an example in Palm Bay. We're selling houses today in Palm Bay for $225,000. I can send you a physical appraisal that was done maybe two or 3 weeks ago that the house is appraising for $245,000. So how come can I sell a house cheaper than what retail sells for? Well, because the builder or the developer, they don't have to have a model house. We use one color scheme for every house. So the property management on a touch-up base is going to be cost a lot less. We have additional tile in stock that we already imported through containers. So we give that savings directly into the investor. And, it's hard to make equity day one on a house, but some areas we're able to offer that. And that's because we generate economy of scale. And we're building a product that we believe, as far as we understand, one of the most toughest products for tenants. They can destroy almost everything, but this is as hard as it's going to get for them.
Great points, Wagner. Thanks for that. And I know that's true for all of our panelists today. And here's one of the things. You've all been guests on the radio show, and we've talked about this specific issue, but it's critical, I think, to bring up now. And that is, why would a developer who could sell a house for $245,000 and have it sell pretty much instantly in today's market, why would they discount that house to an investor for less? And the answer may be obvious, but here's what's true. A real estate investor will buy a property as many times as they need one. Meaning I might buy a property every year. I might buy a property every 3 years as an investor. I might buy a property every month. If I ever do a 1031, I'm going to buy more property. If all you do is deal with, homeowners, they're going to move every 4 to 7 years. And so by choosing to work with investors, what happens, of course, is you guys don't just sell one house to somebody. I know, and they're all shaking their heads. You guys all have clients that come back for, again and again and again, especially because you're in different marketplaces. So I think that's an important point. In fact, Russ, I think this is something that we've talked about a lot, and that is understanding kind of the motivation on every side of the transaction.
Well, in any business, every business has a client acquisition expense, whether they acknowledge it in their budgeting or not. It costs money to acquire a customer. And so the old adage in sales is it's a lot easier to retain an existing customer or sell them more than it is to go get a new customer. And so, any smart business person, of course, a person who's a real estate developer, you listen to these people and they're all talking about all the little areas they find a way to shave a little bit here, a little bit there. Some of it is based on bringing the cost down in the here and now. bulk negotiations, bulk pricing, switching out different types of materials. Others, they actually spend more than they need to in the now because it's going to provide a better cost of ownership over the long term, which really aligns their interest with the interest of an investor a lot more than it does a homeowner. If you really think about it, there's a temptation as a developer of a home, as a home builder, to cut corners a little bit, and you don't care about what happens in the long term because it's kind of a one and done relationship with this buyer. So there's a lot of things to like about having a relationship. So the motivation is there on their part. On the flip side, as the investor yourself, the big advantage is if you're going to take the time and you're really going to go build a portfolio, you take the time to learn a market, to build a team, to understand a demographic and a product niche, and to do the due diligence and understand the product itself. That all takes time, and time is money. If you're doing a small property, and there's a lot of opportunity in small property because it's the easiest property to go up in value quickly in response to good times, then you spend an awful big percentage of your acquisition price in this due diligence if you're only buying one. But if I'm tuned into somebody that where I can buy 10 or 20, you know, maybe my spouse and I each can Fannie Freddie up to 10 each, I can end up with, you know, 10 to 40 units, depending if I'm buying singles or quads or anywhere in between, and leverage the economy of scale of the team and the developer. So it's very much relationship business on both sides of the equation. It is not just transactional, getting a property or selling a property, but it's really building a long-term cooperative relationship. And then you factor in the property management component, where you actually have a developer that's involved in the property management or closely tied to the property management. Now you've got an even greater alignment. So there's a lot of things to like, but it all starts with understanding the motivation of the people on the other side of the fence, which is part of the reason why we're doing this series.
Well, we're going to talk about property management in a minute, but the tie-in is important to recognize that when you have a vendor, a relationship, what we call provider in the real estate guy's world, that has this ongoing relationship via property management, either them directly or a company they work closely with, then there is that accountability. It's not just one and done. But before we get to property management, you know, another distinction. So Wagner, you were kind enough to be vulnerable and tell us that you've done 400 flips, which, man, that's crazy. If you ever watch one of those flip shows, it's like they can go 1,000 ways, right? And of course, there's some TV drama in there, but having done only one flip, that was enough for me. But here's the problem. When you do a flip, you now have to make all kinds of decisions about how far do you go and how much is it going to cost. Sometimes you can figure that out ahead of time, but you might end up with a older, you know, wiring or some terrible plumbing mistake that's been hidden over for 30 years. When it's new, it's new. So we've had this debate over time, like what's less risky, buying a property that's already existing or building something from the ground up? And some people say, well, it's a lot less risky to buy something you can see and touch and feel than it is to deal with building and developing and permits and all that. The other side of the argument is no, if you build it from the ground up, yeah, you got to go through some stuff, but you're going to know exactly what it is. You don't know what's inside those walls. You don't know what's happened to 20 years of that property before you. I remember years ago, there was a house where a car went right through the window and everyone who lived there knew, oh, that's the house, that's the house. And a couple of years later, it traded, right? Somebody bought it. And I bet, you know, they probably didn't even bother to disclose that there was a car in the middle of that window and that it was on the front page of the newspaper. So there's just so many things. When it's new, you don't have to worry about that stuff. Now let's make that transition into property management, because as a buy and hold investor, this is critical. You've got to have great property management. And one of the big attractions to build to rent, to getting a nice new property, is less for you to worry about, less maintenance, less wear and tear. Management is the other big area of worry. And so the two biggest costs in buy and hold investing, and Chris, you spoke to this, turnover, right? What it costs to turn the property when someone moves out before the next person can move in. That's one big cost. And the other big cost is vacancy. The longer it sits there with nobody paying the rent, the longer you're making those payments. So turnover and vacancy, the most important things. And in terms of making sure we get the vacancy part covered, we want to have great property management. So Chris, I want to start with you on this one, because you started as a property manager. I mean, this is really the core of the business for you guys, and you saw the need for inventory and got into the development business. So let's start with property management. And you've dealt with tenants that rent all kinds of stuff, all kinds of price ranges, new, not new, all that. What's the real on the boots on the ground, if you will, attraction to something newer for tenants?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like sitting in a new car. You're not sitting down and wondering, who was in here before. And in these times of COVID, it's even feels extra clean and extra sterile to walk in that brand new house. It smells good, it looks good. You're the first person in there, and and I'll tell you, the way that we're all building these houses on this panel here, even at a turnover, it still looks brand new because, we've taken out all of the items that can wear and tear as part of the business model. And so from a tenant's perspective, they just look in and the floor plans are open. It's new, it's modern. Everything looks like they would see in a brand new floor plan if they were going to go buy a home. The difference is because we put granite, we put the vinyl plank floors in, and I think everyone on this panel does, our new product actually looks nicer than a lot of the spec built product that the national home builders are putting out right now. So if you go walk in, I'm not gonna name names, but you pick any of the 3 biggest national home builders and you walk in any of their spec units, there's going to be carpet all over the place because the national home builders, they don't have to maintain this property later, so they don't care if you have to replace carpet in a year or 5 years. They may or may not include appliances in a new home from a national home builder where, like someone said earlier, we're providing turnkey product so that the buyer doesn't have to add anything, doesn't have to pay a dime after they buy the house. But again, the national home builder, if they say, well, we're going to save $1,000 by not putting a refrigerator in there, people are still going to buy the house, but then they got to go buy a refrigerator. That happens all the time. So a tenant walks in and they see our house, and maybe that same tenant, we live in the pool of tenants that could afford to go buy a home. A lot of people are choosing to rent, and it's not, they have to rent, and the price points that we're renting these homes at, are all in that, $1,200 to $1,800 a month range. So these are folks that have good jobs that can afford to go do whatever way they want. But when they walk in and they see all these upgrades and they see these finishes, it really pushes them the direction of a rental if they were at all on the fence. So, I think a lot of it has to do with the aesthetics from the tenants. But beyond that, we develop our own lots. So we don't have to go buy lots in areas where we don't really want to be. We used to buy houses at the foreclosure auction, and in our day, we've bought well over 1,500 houses at the foreclosure steps. And when you're doing that, you had to just buy the lots for the houses that were being foreclosed on. You didn't really get a choice of where you were buying so much. Whereas, with the new developments, you can sit back, look at the demographics of an area, look at the population growth of an area, and say, hey, you know what? This is where we want to be. And then you go search out that parcel of land in that area where you're going to go put in the water and the sewer and the roads. And then once all that's done, you can build a house. So a lot of the projects that you'll see coming out from me, and I think everybody else on this panel, we might have been working on these projects for 2 years. So you have to get them zoned and you have to get them permitted, and then you actually have to go develop them. And then once you do that, you can build a house. So, we really take a lot of time, effort, and energy to make sure we're picking the right spot, because we're not going to actually be able to build that house for a long time. So we want to feel like the momentum is going great with that area in which we're building, and the tenants feel that, so when we take time to pick those right locations, we pick those right locations, whether the tenants looked at the demographics or not. We knew that they wanted to be there before they knew they wanted to be there.
Yeah, great point. And now let's talk, if we can, a little, Chris, about kind of the alignment of vision, if you will. So you guys have a home building division and you have a property management division. And if someone buys a home from you, they don't have to use your property management, but why wouldn't they? You have a great operation. I've been there. I've toured your offices, met a bunch of your team. So in that case, you've got a vested interest in providing a property to be managed to your management team that isn't going to be a giant headache. Talk about, from that perspective, your managers and the way that you guys work. You have a series of management teams. How do they feel when they get a brand new house versus a 40-year-old house?
Big difference. So, you know, it comes with a totally different aspect of how they're going to have to manage the property. So first of all, they know the product very well because it's our product. So they know exactly what a tenant is going to get. So when the marketing coordinator is putting this out on the market, she knows what that tenant's going to be walking into. When the leasing agent is walking up to the door, they know that they're walking into a beautiful property. And so, you know, and when we have outside leasing agents, if it's a new construction property, an outside leasing agent, they start to know the name and they know, okay, hey, because trust me, leasing agents have walked into all sorts of issues if they're leasing homes for properties that, you know, they don't know who the landlord is, or it might be a 60-year-old house that hasn't been updated in 60 years. They don't know what they're walking into. So, you know, from that aspect, you know, from a marketing perspective, everybody knows what they're getting right out of the gate. And, you know, and I'll jump back a step too. It's important to realize that we are using our own property management company and we are using our own subcontractors on the properties that we own. So we invest side by side with every one of our buyers. So in every neighborhood that we do, we own property in that neighborhood because we're at the same, looking for the same goal that they are. We're looking for long-term cash flow, and we're looking for those tax benefits that come with real estate. And so when we implement something in our property management company, that implements across not only the buyer's properties, but against all of my properties as well. So not only do we have a vested interest just from a customer standpoint to make sure that we're retaining our property management clientele, but what's good for us is good for our customers, and what we implement for our properties gets implemented across the entire platform. So, you know, when you look at how we've departmentalized our property management company, we have people that specialize in just marketing and leasing. So it looks like a call center. You know, we've got all of the incoming leads, and you get a lot of email leads and a lot more phone leads now. And we've instituted the Show Mojo lockboxes, where if people are concerned about COVID, they don't want to see a house with somebody, we can confirm their identity before they get to the property, and they can do a self-showing of that property. And then we've got the rent collection and the tenants management aspect of it. So at the end of the day, the tenants are our customer as well. So as much as we want to make sure that the landlords are receiving their checks and that they're making the profit for their investment, we also want to make sure that the tenants are happy, because if the tenants are happy, they stay longer. And there you go. That just leads to more profit for the investor. So we've got tenant support specialists that are set up just to make sure that the needs of the tenants are taken care of on a day-to-day basis, along with maintenance department. Oh, good.
No, it's good.
I was going to say, along with maintenance department as well. So when there is maintenance on a property, you know, we have specific purchasing folks that go out and they buy, you know, they have bids from all of the vendors every 6 months, and they make sure that we're updating those, and whichever vendor gets the best pricing, that's the one that gets the first call until they're overloaded, and then it goes to the next. So by compartmentalizing, you know, the leasing, the tenant management, the maintenance, the turnover, all of these different departments, everybody in the company, because of the scale, we manage thousands of units now. Because of the scale of this, everybody can be an expert at their piece of the puzzle, and they can be an expert with our individual product that we're out there selling when it comes to the new construction.
You know, when I buy a toaster, I get owner's manual. If I buy a new hard drive, I get the booklet, or I can, you know, scan the code and go online and learn everything about it. A house doesn't come with that. And yet the property manager is the person who's going to deliver the results. They have to find the tenants. So it's important, as we talked about at the beginning, that the markets are correct so that there is that tenant demand. Then you've got to have someone that has that servant's heart, right? Great property managers, I think, are the least recognized and most important people long-term on your team, because they're the ones that, where the rubber meets the road. You know, just having a call center where somebody calls in and wants to rent is different than the departments where people feel like they're being taken care of. And so each of our panelists have a solution here. You kind of have to. The first solution is figuring out how we're going to build and develop the right type of product in the markets that make sense. And the second thing is, when we hand that product off, we've got to have that owner's manual, that manager, the team that's going to be able to do that. Steve, talk about it with your properties, because, you know, fourplexes by their very nature are not owner occupied, even though yours are beautiful townhouse style units. So you, from the very beginning, had to tackle property management. So talk about that solution that you guys have.
Well, I agree with what Chris is saying in that you have to compartmentalize these different components of the build to rent cycle. You have to compartmentalize it, but you also have to streamline it. Because when we very first started doing this, like a bunch of rookies, we thought, oh yeah, people want to have a property manager, sure. But in our communities, in order to be profitable and have this be worth it in the Western US, the land costs a lot. We're going to have to do a lot of density for this to be worth our time. But if I've got 9 different property managers walking around a 200 unit complex that's going through its initial lease up and stabilization, this is a problem, right? It becomes a race to the bottom, right? But that property is charging, X amount of dollars, and that one is Y amount, and everything's different. It's a big issue. So consequently, on our projects, we require you to use our property management, and it's for your own good, because when there's one sheriff in town, this is a much more orderly initial lease up process. It just goes better for everybody. But what you absolutely cannot have is a situation where, imagine, a property manager is doing a walkthrough with an owner of a fourplex or possibly a tenant, and there's some problem with construction. And what you usually can see where you have a builder and a property manager, they throw each other under the bus to look good to the client.
Yep.
Right? Well, the builder isn't doing this right? And the property manager is doing that and the builder is saying, well, that property manager is too picky, right? So we have to compartmentalize, yet we have to streamline so that there is a systematic process that happens. And the other panelists are totally right. You get into this rhythm where the leasing staff, they know what they're getting. They know when they open that door to the show to the tenant, what they're going to see. And so we allow all of our owners to do this final walkthrough, but the property management, they do a separate walkthrough with the builder team who they know and work with on a daily basis, because we're all on the same team here. And they're doing this walk from the perspective of, okay, tenant's going to come in here, they're going to move furniture into this place, and they're going to start cooking on that stove and using that bathroom. What's going to be a problem, right? And they jump on that stuff ahead of time, because we know, you've done this thousands of times, right? You know what the tenant is going to be looking for. So there's an old quote, a military quote out there that says, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? And no build to rent system survives first contact with the tenant. I don't want to make the tenant seem like the enemy here, but you have this elaborate plan of what you're going to build, what you're going to install, what you're going to manage. The tenant doesn't care about any of that, right? They're just looking at this solely from their perspective. What am I going to live in? And that really is the starting point that you have to begin at, and you have to work backwards from, and say, can we ultimately deliver a product that a tenant is going to want to live in? Because if you do that, a manager can lease it. And if the manager can lease it, we can buy that dirt, develop, we can build that product on it. So you really got to get everybody on the same team. And our system is uniquely sensitive to that, given that it's very, very high density. Imagine you build a 200-door unit apartment complex. But in our case, we do that. I got 30 different owners. And so there has to be a very set system that everybody has to play by the same rules on. And then we can optimize the outcome for everybody involved.
Well, I love the concept of the synergy that happens between, and that's not something that normally happens in typical property management. A property manager gets tossed the property after the investor bought it. Now, if you've ever been on a real estate guys trip, one of the things we teach you to do is to ask the property manager, hey, what kind of a property can I put in your portfolio that's going to be great for you and great for me? As opposed to you buy a house and you go to the property manager, go, hey, will you manage this? And they go, oh gosh, why'd you pick that? Like, you got to start earlier in the chain than that. But I guess maybe at the beginning, if we had pointed this out, it would even make more sense. But when you build a fourplex, you don't build a fourplex, you build a group, 100, 200. So it feels very much like an A-class apartment building. That's what it looks like to the average person. So it only makes sense that you have a single point of management for that type of a property. Now, Gene and Wagner, you do primarily single family houses, although you definitely have some multifamily in the works that we're excited to hear about. But when it comes to single family, you've got a couple of different potential solutions. Talk about property management with what you guys are doing. And maybe Gene, we'll start with you, since I know your son's actually in that business.
I'm going to let Wagner take it after this, but I have quite a few comments to make. First of all, we give everybody a choice. And my son does have a very, very large property management company that he formed with one of my investors, who was a NASA engineer. And he was actually the guy that closed up hatch when the guys went off. And he bought houses for me for many years and decided he didn't want to do that anymore. So he went in this company. So all of theirs, it's very high tech. Everything's online. The first thing some of the different groups asked is, what happened the first month with COVID? Everybody paid. Why? It was automatic. They didn't even know that it was not going to happen, right? So it was automatic. So that's number one. Number two, on inspections, we always tell everybody to get an inspection with an inspector. The property manager sends over somebody twice to inspect the house before we close. But of course, as everybody's pointed out, the builder does give warranties. And in the state of Florida, it's a 10-year structural warranty. So that's good. Also, I will say that our builders don't make any less money than a national builder does. The reason that we can give that $20,000 or $30,000 as equity to our people is they don't have to have a model. We have no models. We have no, they don't have to do any kind of advertising or anything like that. So basically, they want to work for us. They want to do it. They decide they're going to do 100 houses. They do them. We sell them. We get them rented. And as Chris has said, all of our houses are similar to his. They're infill lots. So in the years before, it was very hard for me to keep track of if there's 900 houses in this area. Good, you could have about 90 rentals. That's it, or Rex neighborhood. So with the infill, it makes it a lot better. But property manager makes or breaks your investment. You can have a great investment, a great house, we've all done well, you give it to the property manager and you don't like your property manager. That's why we have more than one. Even in the one that's my son's, he has 39 people watching all his houses. So you can call up and talk to them. When we as investors buy something, we don't want another job. We want to buy it and get money every month. That's what we really want to do. So that's how we try to set it up. And with a new house, you're going to get that, I would say, a lot more than you would have an old house. Also, we push single family homes, but we're going to have thousands of multifamily homes in the next 2 years. But single family homes traditionally have appreciated better than multifamily homes, just so you know that. So it depends on how old you are and what you're looking for. If you're looking for cash flow, you're looking for the future, that kind of thing. And there's so many ways you can invest, and there's so many places in the world to invest. The only thing is you want to know that if I put this kind of money in, I'm going to get this back. Nothing is in stone, but I can tell you, I've lost money in the stock market. You lose money, you live long enough, you're going to lose money and you're going to learn. Another thing I can tell you, our buyers never come here. I probably have sold to 3,000 people in the last 20 years. I don't know how many, okay? I probably met 100 of them coming here, and I probably have met another 1,000 of them when I go and talk places, but it's not necessary. I find that people make more mistakes when they come and look and they say, I don't like the kitchen there. It doesn't matter what you like, you're never gonna live there, right? So one of the things that I always say, and Wagner says, is it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. And as the other gentleman has said, that's why we're building new houses. So you keep more money every month.
I appreciate that you've got a perspective, Gene, that goes back all these years, and that you're always upfront with clients. It depends on them. What's their timeline? Build to rent generally works for the kind of person that's going to put something in their portfolio for a while. I'm not buying it on the speculation it's going to be worth more next year. I'm buying it because I found a market that works, a product that works and keeps tenants longer, and a property management solution. So we would maybe stop at calling it turnkey necessarily, but it's pretty close to that in most of these cases. You know, typical turnkey investment is one where someone's gone in, found a property, probably fixed it up, put a tenant in, let that tenant season a little bit, and they sell it like as a completely done, ready to go turnkey investment. Here, you still have some, you know, chance to pick where the house is, because most of you have multiple, all of you have multiple locations, and then within the location, you know, the maps of where the properties may be. So you've got that. You can kind of ladder in terms of when you pick up your next property, and knowing that the build schedule is going to be what it is. An investor might buy a house that's not ready for 8 months, whereas an owner occupant's not going to do that. So it gives you so many advantages. Now, rather than take time today and talk about the nuances of each of your markets, what we've decided to do is to have a separate episode, if you will, with each one of our panelists today, talking about specifically the markets they're in, the product type, the price ranges, the performance. So that's a little beyond the scope of this. But I want to end with a topic, which is just the performance of a property. The real estate agent, no disrespect to real estate agents, usually is going to estimate on the high side to the rents. The property manager is going to give you the real deal. Right? I go looking at a property and the agent goes, oh yeah, $1,200 easy. And the property manager goes, $995, because they're the ones that have to deliver that result. So long-term, you're going to own a property that might cost a little bit more than a resale property, but all the benefits we've talked about make the total cost of ownership down. Can you guys share any thoughts about total cost of ownership and the long-term kind of prognosis? And let's start with you, Wagner.
Total cost of ownership is everything, because that will reflect directly on your cash flow. So that goes back to the capital expenditure, right? When we build properties, that's the first thing I keep in mind. How much money will I have to spend to make this house tenant ready once I have a new tenant come in? So for us, it has been between 5 to 10 years, except a fresh coat of paint, which is really something minimum in a property. So for us, the total cost of ownership in a property, the capital expenditure, the vacancies are very important. I'll give you, as far as our market are concerned, today we have 0 vacancies in our market. Is that normal? I don't know. Maybe we are sitting in a very lucky place, in a good place, and we're lucky to be in, which is Central Florida, but we have 0 vacancies. Another thing is our capital expenditure on new properties for the first 5 years, we have seen to be minimum close to 0. You know, our tenants stay in average on a new property for about 40 months. So the cost of ownership, it's minimum. And then if you go into cost segregation, bonus depreciation, how fast you can claim that property through the IRS instead of 27.5 years, I mean, it's amazing. So the cost of ownership is going to depend up to the investor. How much is he willing to take as far as deductions on that property? How much is he willing to actually, you know, spend on that property initially? In our case, is 0 because it comes ready. Stainless steel appliances, tile. So the cost of ownership, basically it's going to affect. If you do a cash on cash or an ROI, some of our properties are giving you about, you know, almost at 1% rule, which is almost the white unicorn in the room, but the total cost of ownership for us is minimal. We know 1 year bumper to bumper warranty on the first year on a new property. We have manufacturer's warranty, which is still remaining. We have a 10-year structure, which is mandated by the state. Another thing is rent collection. So there's no total cost of ownership if you can collect the rent. Our average rent collection in Central Florida is 98.5% positive, and our rents are collected on the 1st of the month. We don't have a grace period until the 5th. What did we learn? We learned during COVID is communication with the tenants is key. So if you treat the tenant well, he's your client. He will perform better. He'll take care better of your property, and that's going to diminish your capital expenditure. So treat the tenant as your friend. Another thing that we do in every case, and we suggest to every new buyer that buys from us, as Gene very well said, hire an independent licensed inspector from the state of Florida. We don't want the building team to actually communicate with the property management. We want a very independent 60-page report to be sent to the owner and to the builder, so everything can be corrected prior to the property manager taking possession of the property. Why do we do that? I love checks and balances. I wanted to make sure the property manager will receive the property perfect, or at least as close to perfect as possible, so he can actually do a great job. And the builder has the responsibility, even though we have warranty in place, to fix everything prior to closing. So total cost of ownership is going to depend. New properties we have seen, the first 5 years, it's minimum, maybe a fresh coat of paint when you have new tenants come in, but that's pretty much it. Compared to an existing property, which is 30 to 40 years old, is going to be a nightmare probably. So, I can't tell you numbers because different markets vary, but I can say as far as my personal portfolio is minimum. Another thing on property management, very important. We have two sides of property management that we do in Central Florida. We have one property management that does multifamily only, because there's two different animals here. Multifamily, they manage about 36,000 doors. So they have the experience, they have the employees, they have over 400 employees in-house, they manage multifamily. And then on the single family homes and the duplexes and quads, which for us, it's not considered a big multifamily because they are under the Fannie and Freddie loans. They have over 1,200 properties. So also very large team, very experienced, and very wise what you said, Robert and Russell. The property management can tell you what the thermometer of the rent is. Sometimes that's why all of our cash flow sheets, we have two different rent comparisons, because Florida at least is a seasonal market, at least it was, right? So if you come in March, June, July, and August, you're gonna get probably a little bit more rent than what you would during Thanksgiving months or December or the beginning of January. So we wanted to make sure we give you those variances. To be quite honest, a lot of times, almost 100% of the times, we beat the lower rent. But we always tell our investors, go with the lower one so you can be happy with us. You'll be pleasantly surprised. Going back to total cost of ownership, it depends on our properties. In the first 5 years, we have almost zero total cost of ownership. But our cash flows are very fat. They're very rich. Your real estate are real assets, so they're going to be here for your grandsons or your kids. And I just wanted to say another thing that Jean has done for her grandkids that I learned from her. Instead of actually doing a fund for your college funds, she's buying each one of her grandkids a rental property. And that rental property is not only going to be bringing appreciation as well as positive cash flow. So the tenant is paying their mortgage, their insurance, their property taxes, and maybe in 17 years, that property is probably going to be doubling or tripling in price. At that time, you sell the property and you almost have all the money for college and a paid in full property. So, I have learned that from one of my mentors. I just want to share with you guys. It does not relate to your question per se, but I think it's really important that I have applied that to my daughters as well. So that's it for total cost of ownership, and 10,000 more subjects are brought it up.
Love that. Well, one of the big things about this, if you're in it for the long haul, right, you get the benefit of those early years of less cost. Over time, there are going to be costs, but guess what else happens over time? The rent goes up generally, especially if you pick the market right and so forth. We could go on and on, but I think we've really hit the high notes today. So big thanks to our panelists for weighing in. We're going to have individual interviews with each of our panelists coming up in the weeks and months ahead so that you can learn more about their markets. And we'll actually go through some numbers and case studies, show some pretty pictures, that kind of thing. But I think this has been a great overview. Russell Gray, what say you?
I thought it was great. I thought I really had my mind around all this and I was just going to be here to contribute, but I actually learned a ton. And so that was really good. I do think that people need to understand, as I said at the top, is just understanding the cycle that you're in. And, when there's a time when sometimes in a distressed environment where houses are selling for below replacement cost, then you have to buy existing inventory, and that's the best buy. When markets are fairly strong, or there's a lot of stimulus being directed into a specific demographic or a specific asset class like real estate through mortgages and low interest rates and all of that, then you have to realize that the only way you can play the game is to buy something that is going to be at at replacement cost, which means that all things being equal, new is pretty darn attractive as long as you have confidence that the market can absorb the new inventory. And that's where just understanding the markets, and I know we'll get a chance to do a deeper dive with each of these folks in the different markets they're in and the reasons those markets work. But obviously, we're fans of the markets, all the markets that they're in. And I think that the numbers are reflecting that fandom is well placed because of what's going on in the world and the economy right now. I mean, these markets are, accelerating actually faster than they were before some of the negativity hit. So we say all the time, no matter what's going on in the world, there's always going to be positive and there's always going to be negative. But the world changes. And when the world changes, you have to adapt your investment strategy to the changes. And that's part of what this is about, is understanding where we're at in the market cycles right now, why this particular investment strategy in this particular investment class or sub-niche of real estate, residential, makes a lot of sense. And one of the big factors, and hopefully we'll get some help from our panel here in future episodes, is the financing side, because interest rates are ridiculously cheap right now. And you get a chance to lock in, not 10-year financing like you would maybe with a commercial loan, but 30-year financing at maybe the lowest interest rates that you'll ever see in your lifetime. And so and when you pair that to a property that is fairly new, that will only be 30 years old in 30 years, I mean, that can be a good formula. So there's still a lot more to talk about, a lot of things to like, but I think this is a great kickoff to this whole topic. And I think people got a lot out of it. I know I did.
Just like insurance companies like new, lenders certainly like new collateral, so lots to talk about there, but that also varies by location. So if build to rent sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, the first thing is that we will have individual interviews so we can get deeper into the product types and sizes and the rent metrics and the nuances of submarkets and all that with each of the panelists. But we're not going to leave you completely hanging. Each one of these panelists has put together some additional educational material that's available on our website. And you can see here how to order those various reports. And that's probably a way to get your mind around some of those things as well. So big thanks to all the panelists for sharing with us today. Hopefully you're now considering build to rent as part of your future investing portfolio. Until next time, thanks for attending today.
Before you go, 3 things. Number 1, subscribe. When you subscribe, you build up our subscription base, and that helps us reach more people. But even more important, it helps us attract great guests and subject matter experts to share their ideas and information with you. Number 2, click that notification bell to make sure that when we do post a new video on this hot topic, you're notified right away. And number 3, share. Please share this information with friends. Help them get on board this bus. Help them protect and preserve their wealth to take advantage of what's going on in the world today. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.